This may be a long stream. Houstonic.live, Mark Kulak. And there's no going back after this one. I'm sorry. We're getting down to the real 9/11 stuff here. This is it. And it falls upon us. I thank you for supporting me and thank you for trusting me. And over the next hour or two, we're going to learn a lot more about a man named Curt Weldon, Representative Curt Weldon. And I'm not passing judgment about good or bad, but former Representative Curt Weldon, suitcase nukes, biological weapons, 911, anthrax vaccines, etc. And how so many major headlines, they've been right there. They've all tied together so well. The Tucker Carlson interview that Curt Weldon did is very important. At one point, I'm just going to show you a couple pages of newspapers that are just going to tie together everything. And you're going to be so mad that so many people still insist that all the discussion is on island owners and, a few million here or there and insurance claims and white nationalists and Islam and everything else. You're going to see the deepest truth out there. CIA leaks. It's amazing how many things we're just going to tie together. So let me do a little bit of music setup here. Thank you for joining on Monday, August 6, 2025.
Listen, all you New Yorkers.
Get that bass tune right.
To the top of Manhattan, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Latin, black, white, New York, you make it happen. Brownstones, water tower, street skyscrapers, riders, prize fighters, and Wall Street traders. We come together on the subway cars, diversity unified, whoever you are. We doing fine on the 1 and 9 line, on the L, we doing swell on the number 10 bus. We fighting bus, we thorough in the boroughs, cause that's a must. I remember when the beach was all porno flicks, so running home after school, a two-plate kick. At lunch, I go to Pippi's down on Montague Street and hit the Fulton Street Mall for the sneakers on my feet. Dear New York, I hope you're doing well. I know a lot's happened and you've been through hell, so we give thanks for providing a home. Through your gates at Ellis Island, we passed in droves. Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, and Staten, from the Battery to the top of Manhattan, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Latin, black, white, New York, you make it happen. L-I-E, the B-Q-E.
So, of course, that is an open letter to New York City by Beastie Boys. Big part of my life, anyways. Never got to see them live as a trio. Maybe it's one of those treats when you first get to heaven. Those three guys. I'm not saying that they're godlike, but man, that they were an amazing gift. What you see on the screen here is within the last few years, an InfoWars interview with Jerome Corsi, who has, I know, been, I think might have even been trying to reach out to Jonathan Cooey at one point, and Curt Weldon of Pennsylvania. If I said New York earlier, I apologize. Curt Weldon of Pennsylvania. Curt Weldon was also recently on the Tucker Carlson show like 5 months ago. Curt Weldon, it's time to finally tell the truth about 9/11. This is from April 14th, 2025. Now, Tucker Carlson has been really busy lately, news journalist, American news journalist, whatever, Tucker Carlson, with respect to talking about September 11th, 2001. He just did a 5-part series, or has made a 5-part series. I'm not sure if all 5 parts have been made publicly available yet, but at least the first 2 have. And it's painful for me to listen to them because every minute gets more and more painful because I know how far off from a pragmatic, correct narrative these stories are. There's little bits of truth in there, but Tucker Carlson has been very busy with the 9/11 narrative controls. And there was a 24th anniversary of September 11th, 2001, recently in the United States, held in Washington, D.C. proper or somewhere close by. I know that the researcher, journalist, podcaster, Jason Burmis, hosted it. I'm not sure if he organized the whole thing, but he hosted it. And in fact, Jason Burmis is part of, working with a couple of other people, was part of a video series or a video or documentary called Loose Change, which was made around 2003, 4, or 5. And this documentary called Loose Change was his foray, and several other people, into September 11th, 2001 research. And it focuses heavily on the Bush family, Middle East contracts, money. As you can imagine, Israeli influence, FBI allowing the hijackers, the planes were real, of course, Building 7, a lot of things that you've heard before. It doesn't really get anywhere, though, but it just kind of throws a lot of things out there, and it also requires the people to accept quite a bit of the official narrative. But Jason Burmis recently had this 24th anniversary one. I think Tucker Carlson was one of the keynote speakers there. And there was one speaker on towards the end of day 2, that had, towards the end of the day, that had presumably about a 20-minute slot, maybe a little bit more, and he wound up talking an hour, and he wound up yelling a lot. And it was this man, Curt Weldon, who is, I think, almost 80 years old right now. Now, I didn't know that Curt Weldon was a former United States elected representative, federal representative, and for the state of Pennsylvania. It's a big role, but, a lot of representatives come and go, and I didn't know how impactful or influential or what type of roles Weldon was assigned in when he was in government. As it turns out, back in the 1990s, mid to late 1990s, he got in. He was elected as a Republican, and very quickly rose in ranks to a senior role in the Armed Services Appropriations Subcommittee, basically the subcommittee in the United States House of Representatives, where you are part of a small panel that helps steer decisions and write legislation regarding spending. And he was a key person in the investments for missile defense, strategic missile defense, and was involved in, because of that, something called the ABM, or the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty discussions. Now, the investments that the United States has made in a missile defense system to protect the United States against ballistic missiles, which are being launched from elsewhere around the world, is a multi-billion-dollar. I'm presuming it total up well into the hundreds of billions of dollars, probably starting around the early 1980s. It was even known at one point as Star Wars. It was given that name sometime around 1986 or 1987. And so a lot of money was being dumped. Maybe I shouldn't word it that way, because that immediately shows that I suggest a biased position. I mean, I have a biased position on it, but I do agree if the United States is going to waste money on anything, it's please spend it on anything, research related. I think if you're hiring scientists, if you're hiring engineers in particular, if you're advancing computing, if you're advancing ways to store energy, to create energy, I'm all for it. I'm not saying it always goes towards good things, but in absence of any other metadata, as someone who was an engineer, I appreciate that, right, professionally. But he was a big part of that. And in his own words, he was even liked well enough that he was potentially in a position to at some point become head of that subcommittee. And that's big. They spend a lot of money. So when he's popping up recently on this, in the 24th anniversary, talking about we need a new 9/11 investigation, we need a new 9/11 commission, it's an inside job. Gee, no kidding. It's a conspiracy. No kidding, it's a conspiracy. Really? Really? I don't need anyone to tell me that. And he says that he used to be in the government. Well, I don't know what that means, because I never really followed the news that much back then. I was unfamiliar with him. And as it turns out, he had kind of a big role. So in his recent interview on Tucker Carlson, which I think we're going to play a little bit because I think it's a good introduction, okay? Because at little points here, we can do very useful deep dives. And the full video is an hour and a half. I haven't listened to the last 20 minutes, but I've listened to most of it up until then. Why is this coming out now? And because I observed his fever and his energy and noticed that he was in that 9/11 conference with Jason Burmis, also with Tucker Carlson as a keynote speaker, I'm just noticing him popping up a lot. And is he someone who was important and now it's just being revived? Or is he
embellishing
a base that really wasn't there? I don't know. I don't really know much about him. But now that I get the feeling that he is important, I'm including him on keyword searches. And as it turns out, he was involved in a lot of discussion regarding the investments in suitcase nukes, protection, ballistic missiles, and investments in military defense against other concerns. And that, of course, is going to include chemical and biological weapons during that time that he served. So, in his words, let's listen to him a little bit, and then we're going to go back and forth to some articles and some other news pieces after he introduces himself.
You're about to watch 5 days ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It's with a former congressman from Pennsylvania called Curt Weldon. Curt Weldon was a very significant figure in Washington 20 years ago. He was not some obscure backbencher. He was one of the most powerful Republicans in the Congress, about to take over the Armed Services Committee, until he asked questions about the official story on 9/11, at which point the Bush administration sent the FBI to his daughter's house, destroyed her life, never charged her with a crime, and effectively got Curt Weldon bounced out of Congress. I haven't talked to him in 20 years. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but this conversation, the one you're about to see, raises far more questions than I ever anticipated. This is not a crazy person. These are not crazy questions. He makes no claims he doesn't have personal firsthand evidence of. When it ended, I asked him how many other officials who were in and around Washington during 9/11 have similar questions. And he said to me, as far as I know, all of them. And he's still in touch with a lot of those people. After this conversation, which again we've been thinking about ever since, I thought it might be time to look a little more deeply into the 9/11 Commission report. Was it accurate? 9/11 changed the United States forever. Those of us who remember it, who lived through it, can tell you this was a different country afterward, completely different, and not a better country. And so there is no more significant historical event in the lifetimes of any living American than 9/11. And the fact that there are still outstanding questions about what exactly happened and why is troubling. Up until this point, most of the people who've addressed these questions are either crazy or seem slightly crazy. Now is the time for a sober look, not a wild-eyed, speculative look, but an honest look and honest conversations with people who participated in the response to that day, government officials. And so we're going to do that. We are planning right now a multi-part documentary series on 9/11. And we hope to bring that to you as soon as we possibly can. And now, former Congressman Curt Weldon. Congressman, thank you so much for doing this. I haven't seen you in 20 years. One of the last times I thought about you was right around 2006, and you had been a frequent guest on the show that I was hosting then, and I read that the FBI had raided your daughter's house. And I thought, man, I always like Curt Weldon. I guess he's corrupt. And then I never heard anything about it. And then you lost that election to a guy who I always thought was kind of repulsive. And then probably 15 years passed, and I thought to myself, wait a second, Curt Weldon was the only Republican I'm aware of who criticized the U.S. response, the intel agency's response to 9/11, who wrote a book blaming elements of the U.S. government for allowing 9/11 to happen and then covering it up. And then right on the cusp of becoming, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the FBI raids your daughter's house and you lose an election in which your opponent has funding from all over the United States. No one's ever heard of this guy. He's got more money and you're out of Congress. And I began to think maybe this was a setup. So I thought I would ask you.
Well, it definitely was. And you're always one of my heroes. I enjoyed your show with Paul Begala and when I did Hannity
many years ago,
all the others, and enjoyed. And I was always, I took my work very seriously. I'm a teacher by profession, youngest of 9 kids, firefighter as a volunteer all my life. And that's my devotion even to this day. I don't get any money for it, but it's what I'm committed to. and why I care about 9/11 so much. And I was at the Trade Center in 93 at the invitation of Fire Commissioner Howard Safer to go up there and learn about what had occurred the first time they attacked us.
Okay, so someone who's in the volunteer fire department, someone who's spearheading efforts for revived fire controls in U.S. federal infrastructure, involved all the way since 1993 in reviewing the bombing of the World Trade Center. Someone who seems to have a lot of interest in what a building would look like after it burns down, and definitely would have the ability to identify if a building seems to have perhaps melted because of million-degree heat, which could only be caused by a suitcase nuke.
And they introduced me to a young fire officer, former Marine, 5 kids, named Ray Downey. He became one of my best friends. Ray told me what he thought we should do. I took his advice seriously and wrote the legislation to create the Gilmore Commission. The Gilmore Commission was chaired by Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore, a man of integrity. I had him on a podcast last September for 20 minutes. And the Gilmore Commission's recommendations were largely what the 9/11 Commission took credit for after the fact. One of those recommendations was to have a fusion center of intelligence be put together. At the time I was doing this on behalf of the firefighters to deal with disasters, I was in the position to oversee the funding as the chairman of all military research and technology funding, about $180 billion. The services were building information dominant centers. The Army's was at Fort Belvoir, and I would go down there regularly and meet with them, and we became good friends. I didn't bother getting ready into the program. I didn't need to, but I knew what they were using with new software like Starlight and Spires and Fusion and data mining and analysis and link analysis. This was going to be important to prevent what happened in 93.
Yes.
So I supported
Which was the first bombing of the World Trade Center.
First bombing.
Right.
And as a result, I went to John Hamre, Deputy Secretary of Defense under Clinton, and I said, John, you have to go see what they're doing down there. He did. He called me, said, you're right, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, John Hamre had endorsed me for chairman of the committee in 2000, as did
John Hamre is mentioned multiple times in this very curious book called Germs by Judith Miller, which was published on September 9th, 2001.
Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
This is before 9/11, obviously. Both endorsed me publicly. I had their letters. And he said, but you've got to convince the CIA and the FBI to let us use their raw data because there are 33 classified systems. And if they don't allow us to use their data, this won't succeed. On November the 4th of 1999, in my office in the Rayburn building, I had John Hamre, Deputy Secretary of Defense. I had the Deputy Director of the FBI, and I had their names, and the Deputy Director of the CIA. And we talked about the NOAA, National Operation Analysis Hub, policymaker and warfighters tool to deal with emerging transnational terrorist threats, the Fusion Center. Hamre said, we need this. I'll manage it. I said, I'll get it funded. The FBI said, great, we're all in. And the CIA said, we don't want it. We're not supporting it. We're doing something called CI-21 on our own. I spent 2 years traveling around the country, giving speeches at intelligence forums, calling for a fusion center. I put language in 2 successive defense bills calling for a fusion center. 9/11 happens. I get frantic calls from 4 of those professional staffers at the Able Danger Team, which I later learned was the name of this group at Fort Belvoir. We have to see you right away, Mr. Chairman. Scott Philpott, Annapolis grad, Navy career officer, commander of 4 ships, pleading with me to meet. Tony Schaefer, Lieutenant Colonel, Bronze.
This is ridiculous. So this Tony Schaefer guy is all over Twitter. His Twitter handle is spooky. He's supposedly some ex-military intelligence agent who I guess had information that the FBI knew that there was going to be a hijacking a year before. There was a hijacking without question. It was definitely a hijacking, and that people just sort of sat back and let the hijacking happen.
Star recipient, spy for the military.
And all of that talk about Able Danger and the book Able Danger, I don't know, and Schaefer and this and that. This is all super wrapped up in the activity of this Curt Weldon.
Eileen Pricer, Lieutenant, Air Force career intelligence officer, expert on computers, and Eric Kleinsmith. I met with each of them privately. They all told me the same story, and they rolled out the charts that I just showed you. Those charts I will make public now because they're not classified. I showed them when I testified before the Senate hearing. We identified every cell of Al-Qaeda in the world the year before 9/11. We identified the New York cell a year before 9/11. We knew there was going to be a problem. The Able Danger team tried to go to the FBI and Justice Department 3 times. We have the names. All 3 times they were stopped. We have the names of the person in the FBI that was told to deny the meetings. They were not allowed to transfer the information. That information, when I came out with my book, Louis Freeh, former FBI director, wrote in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal and said on Good Morning America, could have prevented 9/11 from happening. That's not me saying that. That's Louis Freeh. And General Keith Lambert, our general in charge of special operations on
He's pushing this book called Horse Soldiers by something Stanton.
horseback,
Or something
was
Station.
asked in this award-winning book, became a movie, on page 27, General, what were your thoughts when 9/11 happened? And he said, within seconds I knew who had done the attack, and I knew it involved Muhammad Atta. Thirdly,
How?
after this all broke and I came out with my book criticizing the agency and started really going crazy protecting these brave heroes that were being abused by Defense Intelligence, the Inspector General for the Pentagon files a whistleblower paper. I have a copy of it. I'll give it to you. His name is John Crane. He asked for protection because his bosses in DIA refused to allow him to become a whistleblower when he told them that he was told to lie to the Congress. He was told to misinform the Congress. I have that in writing, Tucker. The 9/11 Commission is a cover-up. 1,000% cover-up. Zelikow was the lead of the cover-up.
Philip Zelikow was the
Philip
chairman.
Zelikow.
Beautiful. He knows Philip Zelikow. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hello, Marie. Hello, Christy. Hello, my darlings. Hello, hello, hello. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Phil Zelikow. That's not a household name. Last name Zelikow. Phil Zelikow. So Phil Zelikow is the 9/11 Commission. This is this guy openly saying this, Phil Zelikow. Phil Zelikow is also a key person in this book called Germs. All right? So wait. So a book that was highlighted throughout the summer of 2001 as upcoming. A book that was on talk shows in the first week of September 2001. A book that was released on September 9th, 2001. A book whose excerpts were used by Alex Jones as proof of the U.S. military was going to do a bioterror attack. A book that includes multiple mentions of Philip Zelikow. A book where the audiobook of Philip Zelikow, audiobook redacts all mentions of Philip Zelikow. And now this man here says that Philip Zelikow is leading the cover-up. So the Mr. Cover-up is in the book that no one will talk about. I'm telling you what, for other citizen journalists, it's almost as if they needed Charlie Kirk to get killed so they would have an excuse not confront why they won't talk about this. The 9/11 commissioner, the 9/11 cover-up guy, is one of the main characters in here. Before 9/11. Now, this Able Danger stuff here is out there, okay? Hello, Garden Variety Girl. If you go to Wikipedia, Able Danger. Able Danger is a classified military planning effort led by the United States Special Operations Command, or SOCOM, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. It was created as a result of a directive from the Joint Chiefs of Staff in early October 1999 by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Hugh Shelton, to develop an information operations campaign plan against transnational terrorism. All right. According to statements by Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer and those of 4 others, Able Danger had identified 2 of 3 al-Qaeda cells in the September 11th attacks. The Brooklyn cell linked to the Blind Sheik and, Muhammad Atta, etc., and pilots other 19 hijackers. Okay, I'm not saying that this effort doesn't exist, but this assumes that there were hijackers. And this is such an interesting part. No matter how you approach, how people are allowed to approach it, or how would you say it, narratives, there are hijackers. Anyone who suggests that there were not hijackers is considered so fringe they cannot be listened to, or they should be laughed at. It's similar to no virus. You can think that there was a lab virus, a natural virus, a gain-of-function virus, a virus that was perhaps misunderstood. Or there's a million permutations, but then there's no virus. And no virus people believe that, I don't know, if you hold on to a glass of water and think about how much you loved your deceased grandmother and put it in the freezer, take it out of the freezer, it's good. You shake it out, it's going to come out in the form of little hearts or something like that. You're a nut job. There has to be hijackers. And because there are hijackers, that means there has to be this malicious intent to let the hijackers fly the planes into a building. There has to be hijackers. So all of the conspiracy, and it's considered conspiracy just to get to this point, there must be hijackers. I'm not sure there were hijackers at all. I'm not sure that planes actually hit buildings. I said it. What I will tell you is a plane did not crash where they currently have the Flight 93 Memorial. I don't know what happened to the plane. The plane might have been hijacked, but that plane, whatever hit there, was, God is my witness, not a plane filled with people. All the evidence, the pictures, everything that you will see, all the accounts day of, there was no plane there. I don't know what happened to the plane. They could have hijacked it and crashed it somewhere else. I don't know. When you think of the physical circumstances, the limitations of how these planes are designed, their speeds at certain elevations, these were not planes that hit. So I don't know. The planes might have been hijacked and something else happened to them. I don't know. No one can account for the people. But whatever those explosions were, things that hit buildings, they weren't planes. Whatever the case here, all of this stuff and all of this inside research here, that this Schaefer and so on that Curt Weldon is talking about here, I don't know, is a mythology. And this is promoted as the mythology. Yet the mythology that he's promoting here, and then he's pinning it on people who are in a very real book. Here's the problem, okay, is that this book exists. This book is the problem. This book solves 9/11. This Germs book. Now, I want to let it play, but I'm feeling the energy come on right here because you may think that you're not really sure where this is going, and sometimes I have to give a bit of a preview so that you can see where this is going, right? These mentions that Curt Weldon here is making of Philip Zelikow, of Schaefer, of so on, of Abel Danger. Abel Danger, by the way, and the leading, how would you say, attorney for Schaefer is Mark Zed. And you know what? Mark Zed is also an associate of Merrill Nass and is also in this book. So this book, coincidentally, not only lists the bioterror, it not only lists anthrax. It not only has a first sentence about anthrax vaccines, it talks about the Human Genome Project. It includes every conspirator you could possibly think of and then some, and then the real people. And it comes out September 9th, 2001, and it's avoided like the plague by everyone who's doing 9/11 research. But it even includes most of the names involved in this whole Abel Danger nonsense, including Mark Zed, including Zelikow, and so on and so forth. So, never at any point will Curt Weldon mention the Germs book. He can't. Even though I have newspaper articles right now showing that he is very aware and even involved in the threats of biological terrorism. 98, 99, 2000, 2001, and immediately afterwards. He's totally aware of it. He's just not talking about it anymore. Just like he never talks about suitcase nukes anymore. So the fact that he's not talking about the Germs book, it shouldn't be a surprise to us. But there's another element here that is really, really wacky. And that is how, let me see if hopefully I got that page captured somewhere. I'm going to open up one newspaper page from August 10th, 2005. Now, the top story here in this newspaper article is 9/11 panel. Excuse me. Nope. Hello, Current. Miss you, buddy. 9/11 panel to probe reported tracking of Al-Qaeda cell. This is from August 10th, 2005. Now, Weldon was ousted around 2006 or 2007. Rumsfeld kicked him down a notch. This is stuff Weldon is passing it off as he was being persecuted. But here's the 9/11 panel to probe reported Al-Qaeda cell activity. There's a picture of Weldon, and it's talking about Weldon's pursuit of how people had the identities of the 9/11 hijackers. There were definitely hijackers. They definitely were there. Never makes a mention of the Germs book. The Germs book is written by Judith Miller. The Germs book is written by New York Times Judith Miller. This is 2005. Now, Judith Miller, after 9/11, was involved in another thing, which you'll see reflected at the same time. Judith Miller is incarcerated because she's refusing to testify to a grand jury after leaking the source of the identity of the undercover CIA officer Valerie Plame. So Valerie Plame was how would you say, outed as a CIA officer sometime around 2002 or 2003 by Bob Novak. And Bob Novak had a source, and I think the source came through the New York Times reporter Judith Miller. So Judith Miller is, all of the buzz about Judith Miller at this time is regarding how journalists need to be protected because she was involved in some accidental uncovering of a CIA asset. It's probable that Judith Miller and this whole thing about Valerie Plame, which, by the way, involves very specifically also somewhere in the middle, Dick Cheney. Somehow Dick Cheney is involved in this as well. Well, of course, Dick Cheney's involved in 9/11. But Judith Miller, instead of Judith Miller's germ book getting all the attention, we're talking about Judith Miller and how she is being persecuted, and we need to protect Judith Miller because she accidentally, outed a CIA agent. And then everyone showing pictures of Valerie Plame. And Valerie Plame, wow, Valerie Plame's so beautiful. No, that's not Valerie Plame, sorry. Valerie Plame, beautiful, beautiful, blonde, stunning CIA agent. And everyone's talking about Scooter Libby and Dick Cheney and everything else. These things are happening at the same time. All right? At the same time, the whole Scooter Libby, Cheney, Judith Miller thing with Valerie Plame is getting lots of attention, and Judith Miller is turning into someone we need to protect. At the same time, Weldon is also getting is making a lot of noise, and then eventually he gets kicked out. There's no way that Weldon doesn't know who Judith Miller is. There's no way that Weldon doesn't know about this book, Germs, that Judith Miller wrote, that talks about all of that same able danger people, including Zelikow, who Curt Weldon just went off on a huge fiery rant about. He knows these people, or at least knows of them, and he's very clear that he knows that they have some responsibility of 9/11. But instead of talking about, hey, why is it that these buildings exploded? The Twin Towers didn't melt. The Twin Towers didn't fall down. The Twin Towers exploded. They exploded. Building 7 collapsed. You see the video of Building 7? The inside collapses and the building falls. That's what a controlled demolition looks like. The Twin Towers, they keep saying the Twin Towers controlled demolition. Really? When someone demolishes a building, they include enough explosives so that the supports crack and then the building falls. Nobody wires a building so that when the buildings are collapsing, pieces of the building wind up 300 feet away. The Twin Towers, yes, they collapsed into themselves. They also collapsed several hundred feet away because they exploded. They exploded. And it's such an important part of the discussion that nobody's picking up on. You know, someone who should know a thing or two about building demolition would be someone who is everybody's friend, Curt Weldon, who's just the humble volunteer fireman. Not many volunteer firemen get to propose legislation to improve the fire codes at the White House, or were given tours in 1993 of the World Trade Center after someone tried to blow that up. This is someone that should know, like, hey, why are there signs that there was, multi-million degree thermite used in in these towers? Is he talking about any of that? He's so fixated on one part of the discussion, and unfortunately, Tucker Carlson is going right along with it. Yeah, they're willing to take on the controlled demolition idea, but only for Building 7. But what about the Twin Towers? Those things had possibly nearly a kiloton worth of explosive capability in them. How did that wind up in those buildings? Why were pieces of the building wind up hundreds of feet away? That's not a safe controlled demolition. That's almost like someone staged it to look as though those buildings were blowing up. Well, what would blow up a building like that? Well, I don't know, maybe a huge bomb. How would a huge bomb get in there? I don't know. But if you believe in a suitcase nuke would be the perfect thing to say that did it. Wow. Curt Weldon was the guy in the United States government that was talking most about suitcase nukes in 1999 and 2000. And he was a fireman. And he had a tour of the World Trade Center before the first time someone tried to blow it up. And he would know firsthand exactly, because he's also an enthusiast of suitcase nukes, that according to at least Wikipedia-level knowledge of a suitcase nuke, you're going to see evidence of a multi-million degree temperature at some point. Something which would not happen with a conventional explosive, but would be visible if someone put thermite or something in there, which is not necessary to demolish a building, as far as I know. So this is a train wreck right now. And the whole train wreck comes down to how many narratives can they push out there, how many misdirects can they give people so that they please, how many more Charlie Kirks are going to need to be shot and then have people running all over town pretending they're finding evidence about it, even though he's probably not even really dead, so that we just don't talk about this one single book.
It was handpicked by Condoleezza Rice.
Wow. So Zellicow was handpicked by Condoleezza Rice. Really? That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because we got, where was the Condoleezza Rice article that I found here? Where's the Condoleezza Rice article that I found here? I know that there was a mention of Condi on here as well. It might actually be on the page here for this whole Able Dangerous stuff. No. So it's on here somewhere. It must be on one of the Judith Miller pages then. Let me see here. 1 second. I just found a whole bunch of things that. Oh, yeah, you have to go to the, you know who else? Because you know who else Condoleezza Rice was involved in. Condoleezza Rice, who he hates. I don't know why. There's something about her that I find classy. And Valerie Plame, let's see here. Valerie Plame was also involved in Condoleezza Rice was also involved in the Valerie Plame story. Let's see here. Let's go up a little bit. Here we go. According to Scooter Libby's testimony, the vice president later advised him that the president had authorized defendant to disclose the relevant portions of the NIE, the National Intelligence Estimate, to Judith Miller. The Germs book. According to his testimony, Scooter Libby, by the way, is known as Germ Boy. The information that Scooter Libby was authorized to disclose to Judith Miller, author of Germs, no one can talk about this book, quote, was intended to rebut the allegations of an administration's critic, former Ambassador Joseph Wilson, unquote. A couple of days after Scooter Libby's meeting with Miller, then National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice told reporters, quote, we don't want to try to get into kind of selective declassification, unquote, of the National Intelligence Estimate, adding, quote, we're looking at what can be made available, unquote. So Condoleezza Rice is also involved in the discussion of the unveiling and the unmasking of Valerie Plame as a CIA intelligence analyst, or working as a NOC. I can't believe the Valerie Plame story is definitely connected. I don't have it quite figured out yet, okay? But Judith Miller is in jail at the same time that he is obviously continuing to ignore Judith Miller's book, Germs, but also raising all kinds of hell about Zelikow and hijacker knowledge, Able Danger, and everything else, all people that are part of Judith Miller's Germs book, all the way back in 2005, before he gets kicked off of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee.
When Tony Schaefer,
Mr. Spooky,
met Zelikow over in Afghanistan.
Zelikow again.
Because Zelikow took a team through to see if there were soldiers who had maybe encountered some information about 9/11 in advance.
Well, Zelikow is in this book. If you want to know what Zelikow did in advance, you know what he's doing? He's talking about biological terrorism and anthrax vaccines and the Human Genome Project and other concerns related to national intelligence. Why don't we talk about that in the Judith Miller book?
Tony Schaefer had been back deployed in Afghanistan at the time. So he told his commanding officer I should talk to them because I was a part of a special team. He met with Zelikow. They exchanged business.
Are they going to stop talking about this guy in the Judith Miller book?
Cards and Kabul. And Zelikow said to him,
wow,
Lieutenant Colonel, you've got to see me as soon as you get back to America. It's very important. When Tony went back to the States, they had shut down his office, locked his office, secured all his files, and they then worked to destroy his personal reputation. They tried to destroy his career. I went to the floor and did a 1-hour special order, calling it a scandal bigger than Watergate.
Okay. Here's another tip, me to you, something I've observed, okay? If somebody needs to be destroyed, they will be destroyed quietly. If somebody is saying something that's getting a lot of attention and they need to be silenced, you silence them. You make them go away quietly. As quietly as possible. You censor them like I get censored. I am easily among the most censored channels in the world. Easily. I don't think there are 10 more channels more censored than me worldwide. For real. This is what soft censorship looks like. I should have 2 million followers by now, easily. And I should have money coming in to afford a staff and everything else and have a social committee and all this other stuff. Or you kill them in a way that no one talks about them again. Preferably like a fast cancer, maybe an esophageal cancer, something that like what Tony Bark would get, or John Wolfe, or you have someone just die in their bathroom and then no one talk about them again, such as Brandy Vaughn, probably with a gummy that was laced with fentanyl or something like that. That's what happens when someone is a threat. You don't have a big parade saying that, hey, they're a threat and raid their office and then allow people to go on to podcasts and shows like Tucker Carlson and say that they're being persecuted. This is a tactic used so that everybody looks at and trusts somebody. That is how this works. Nobody is censored loudly. Nobody is censored loudly. Nobody is censored with a great big parade and trumpets and then first page news. This person is being censored. They are censored and quietly killed, or quietly, heavily, for real censored without anyone knowing about it. So this is bullshit. This is promoting a false narrative.
Watch the footage. It's available online. I said, this is outrageous that the Defense Intelligence Agency is screwing a lieutenant colonel because he's telling the truth about what he was told to talk about when he came back from Afghanistan. Tony Shaffer then went to work in the reserves because he had been basically harassed by the regular army because of what Zelikow did.
So I just want to back up a couple steps. So you're saying what others have said before, which is that elements of the U.S. government worked really, really hard to hide the fact that they could have prevented 9/11, that they had all the relevant information and for whatever reason ignored it. But motive really matters here. Do you believe that there were people in the U.S. government who made a bunch of mistakes or were too territorial and didn't share information with other agencies, therefore 9/11 happened, which is basically the conclusion of the 9/11 report, I think? Or do you believe that there were people in the U.S. government who knew it was going to happen and allowed it to happen on purpose?
Well, first of all, the 9/11 report has no credibility. I don't believe anything that is in that. It's a bunch of garbage.
Okay.
It's a lot of paper that has no substance. And I tend not to want to speculate on things that I can't prove 100% myself, or I'm not willing to take a polygraph. What I can tell you unequivocally is there was a cover-up. And before I answer your question, I would state one more fact. Tony Shaffer got approval from his commanding general after this whole thing happened to write his memoirs. His memoirs are called Dark Heart. So he wrote the book. He had a publisher. He went to his commanding general to review.
They're going to tell a story now of a book that was made, and the book was censored. The government bought every copy of the book. But here we are on Tucker Carlson telling the world about the book, and then we're going to tell you where you can find the censored book. And the book obviously must be the truth because they censored it loudly.
The book as his protocol. His commanding general said, "Fine, Tony."
This is like Robert Malone when he says you should not trust these people, these journalists, and he'll give names of people, and then he'll link to their websites. He'll link to their videos. These are bad people. These people, and then he links to them.
There's nothing there that's a problem. Publish it. Tony publishes the book. Our deep state finds out he's publishing the book. A cease and desist order is issued against the publisher. Stop publishing the book. It's too late. Our government buys all 10,000 copies of the first edition of Dark Heart with taxpayer money, and they destroy them. So I asked Tony on a show last September, as I've done many times, Tony, you have the original version of the book, right? Yes, here it is, Congressman. You have the redacted version, right? Yes, here it is. What did they want out of your book that was so sensitive? What secret information were you giving, Tony? What classified information did your boss not see? He said, Congressman, the only thing they wanted out of my book was the fact that I named Zelikow and that I had briefed him in advance.
Wow. So Zelikow He's saying this Phil Zelikow, and I don't necessarily have an extensive page on Phil Zelikow. But I have a few mentions of him here. Let's open it up here. ZEL Zelikow, just so you can kind of picture it. Okay, he's come on, I know I have a page for him. Yeah, Philip David Zelikow. He does have a. I don't know. I'm not going to pass any judgment, but he does have a short Wikipedia page that I've copied in, and it's been interesting some of the things that they've added and removed. He's definitely, working with Bob Woodward, Second Iraq War. I mean, there's a lot of weird things about this guy. He's definitely, in the machine. And I don't need to do an assessment of him. We don't need to do an assessment, maybe of him, okay? You're going to find a lot of nasty stuff probably. What matters, though, is Zelikow is being called out repetitively as someone who knew that 9/11 was going to happen, someone who was part of the 9/11 Commission, someone who is part of the 9/11 cover-up. He's this key person who Curt Weldon is yelling about over and over and over and over again. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But if Zelikow is such a key person, then why not have a mention that he's also mentioned in this book by Judith Miller that was released 2 days before 9/11? It's an impossibility. I'm trying to be careful about overstating my case on certain things. I show a great amount of restraint. But everything that is not being shared about 9/11 and how you can only really understand COVID-19 if you dig into this is available. If you just read this book and then enumerate all of the impossible coincidences, including the fact that Robert Malone's work on the DNA vaccine is even part of this book. It's impossible. And Tucker Carlson won't get there. Of course, Tucker Carlson won't get there. And of course, Curt Weldon's never going to get there. But Curt Weldon should know it. If Curt Weldon knows everything there is to know about this Phil Zelikow, then he should know that it was also in the book by Judith Miller. And Judith Miller winds up getting incarcerated as being part of the Valerie Plame CIA outing right around the same time that he's going through all of the 2004 and 2005 stuff. Matter of fact, I think it's probably around the same time that his daughter winds up getting roughed up or whatever, arrested or something or other by the FBI. And it ties all of these disparate things together. That's the other thing. These seem like separate stories. There's Valerie Plame over here, and then there's Abel Danger over there, and then there's the suitcase nuke story over there, and there's all of these disparate things. You can tie it all together, though, by having first of all letting go of a couple of the things which we are required to constantly consider. Like every discussion has to be anchored in there were hijackers. That they don't allow for any analysis at all that does not include hijackers.
That, Tucker, is treason. That means our agencies use their position not for something involving our national security, but for involving a cover-up of a person's identity who was publicly approved by the Congress of the United States, appointed by the security advisor to President Bush. It's a massive cover-up.
At what point following 9/11
And he might have been a little sloppy there because now he's talking about identities being opened up. And that's exactly what Judith Miller was being included as part of. I wouldn't even be surprised if Judith Miller... Of course Judith Miller's involved in this. She wrote a effing book with Zelikow all over it.
Since I just want to restate, you served in Congress for about 20 years,
20 years.
I think. Yep. And you really were at the heart of these questions, national security questions in the Congress. You were about to become chairman of Armed Services. So you're at the top of the pyramid for receiving relevant intelligence. At what point, you weren't just some random guy at all.
No.
At what point after 9/11, the attacks of that day, did you realize there's something bad going on here?
Well, it started before 9/11 when I realized that the intelligence I was getting as the vice chairman of the committee was not really solid intelligence. I would get better information from...
Okay, so let's look at some of this suitcase nuke stuff here. Going back to the suitcase nuke page. Let's look at, these are, we can find discussions regarding suitcase nukes and Curt Weldon here. He's talking about missing suitcase nukes. He's talking about loose nukes. And, of course, that creates the opportunity for a Broken Arrow event. Maybe even the possibility of, who knows, a terrorist attack. Maybe even, according to some of these articles here. Let's see if I can find the one that here. Where is it? I'm going to find it. I know things are a little bit out of order here. Some of these articles here are very clear about the risks of, World Trade Center with a suitcase nuke. Maybe he's talking about that. Or maybe he's, and of course, suitcase nukes, plutonium, etc. Let's look at an article from not too long after September 11th, 2001. This is the real headline. Now, this is out of the UK, which means it's probably versions of this in the United States that are being censored. So this is just after September 11th, 2001. Only hours after the terrorists' attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, Republican Representative Curt Weldon went on CNN and announced he didn't want to hear anyone talking about funding for schools or hospitals. From here on, it was all about spies, bombs, and many other things. He said, quote, "The first priority of the U.S. government is not education. It's not the health care. It's the defense and protection of the United States citizens," he said, adding later, "I'm a teacher, and I'm married to a nurse. None of that matters today." It's such a weird thing to say. And the same article goes on to talk about how the Pentagon wants to waste money on missiles and not boring old Food and Drug Administration. Continuing on, many doctors in the United States public health care system have not been trained to identify symptoms of anthrax, botulism, or plague. A recent U.S. Senate panel heard that hospitals and health departments lack basic diagnostic tools, and information sharing is difficult since some departments don't have email access. Many health departments are closed on weekends with no staff on call. If treatment is a mess, federal inoculation programs are in worse shape today. The only laboratory in the United States licensed to produce the anthrax vaccine has left the country unprepared for its current crisis. Why? It's a typical privatization debate. The lab in Lansing, Michigan, used to be owned and operated by the state. In 1998, it was sold to Bioport, which promised greater efficiency. The new lab has failed several FDA inspections, thank you, Merrill Nass, and so far has been unable to supply a single dose of the vaccine to the U.S. military, let alone the general population. As for smallpox, there are not nearly enough vaccines to cover the population. So to review, again, here, these are articles, and Curt Weldon has become the face of this, as bad GOP, bad Republicans just wanting to spend money on missiles and not thinking about these other things. He's a part of it at this time. It's an interesting spin. But if you go a little bit later, here we are later, 2001 USA Today. Again, Curt Weldon is now calling for, let me see here. He called for an informal session then, meeting with biotech firm Novavax, which is working to create a smallpox vaccine using a killed or inactivated vaccine. So again, he's totally aware of these concerns, and I can find articles beforehand. This is a really wacky photograph, by the way, in this early October 2001 article. The missile defense system is being redrawn as vaccines. Vaccines being launched into space to kill the real threat to mankind, which is biological. It's a beautiful photograph, or I should say a cartoon. It captures all of it. We're talking nukes. We're talking government pork barrel spending. We're talking about New Age vaccines, which are also clearly described in this book, which Bill Clinton was so excited about, and how they're going to protect us against pandemics and germs from terrorists and everything else. How is Weldon not making any mention of this stuff? Of the interview that I've watched so far, and I haven't watched the last 20 minutes, no mention of suitcase nukes, no mention of biological terrorism. He talks about cyber threats, and he lists out the same things, but he does not list out those two things in particular. Now, he was concerned about cybersecurity and so on. He did make mention of that back in 1998, 1999 as well, to his credit and to his defense there. He's also really big on this concept of opening things up. It sounds like it's coming from the right place. First off, there was no hijackers. I don't believe there are any hijackers at all. And it's amazing how that's the one thing that is non-negotiable when it comes to 9/11 research. There were hijackers. You cannot ignore hijackers. And his analysis of this is there were hijackers. Therefore, 9/11 could have been stopped, and people definitely knew who the hijackers were. A year in advance, I guess, they already knew who all the hijackers were going to be, and the whole Able Danger thing, and they could have stopped it if they just shared information. Well, if there were hijackers, and if the planes were hijacked, and if the buildings only fell down because of the planes and because of the jet fuel, etc., and if they did, and if somebody did know who those hijackers were a year in advance, and if that information was on a databases, and that's an awful lot of ifs, that's actually an impossible combination of things, by the way, then maybe opening up the databases and allowing multiple agencies to view those databases could have stopped it. Maybe. But the underlying premise is impossible. So he's arguing that 9/11 could have been stopped if we opened up and shared the databases. But the things which he said were stoppable were also fictional. Sort of like saying, if we just monitored more proteins around the planet, if we just monitored more bat anuses, COVID-19 wouldn't have happened. Really? So now, if COVID-19 only happened because of a wild, wacky-ass protein that came out of an anus of a bat somewhere, then I guess that's true. But if COVID-19 was not because of a pandemic-ing RNA virus, then that's false. Similarly, opening up the databases couldn't have stopped 9/11 because that's not how it happened. So why is he so focused on this? Why is he so focused on non-military agencies having access to military databases? He's on a path to head off and control spending for the United States military, but somehow he also wants military-grade secrets, I guess, opened up and available to other agencies? Maybe? That seems weird. It also comes at the same time that the United States military through Walter Reed, has opened up a very strange center of excellence. A center of excellence with a middle of nowhere Hickville Hospice Care Center, Windber, Pennsylvania, to start some new weird cutting-edge cancer vaccine research, where the IT center is being set up by none other than Robert Malone and Jill Glasspool Malone. That's odd. So the U.S. military has all of this internal data on cancers and vaccines, etc., but I guess that those databases need to be opened up because we're going to be working with a third party right now in the same state of Pennsylvania that Curt Weldon is from.
Bill Gertz, a reporter that you know,
Yes.
coming to me with anonymous sources leaking to him
Yes.
about intel matters. And I would then go to the CIA and say, why am I getting this information from a reporter that I know you're leaking from classified sources that I'm not getting as a member of Congress who's the vice chairman of the Defense Committee? Are you playing games with me?
So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit here. I'm going to go up to around minute 19.
So I said to the CIA, I have information that bin Laden's in Ladiz. This is their response to me. Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny them. I was in shock. We're sending kids to die in Afghanistan, and we can't confirm or deny whether or not bin Laden's in Ladiz? 3 months go by. I'm still supporting the president. My intel team comes back to me and say, Curt, he's being treated at a military hospital outside of Tehran. I go back to the classified briefing and I ask the question in front of the full committee. And the answer from the CIA is, Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny that bin Laden is being treated at a military hospital outside of Tehran while we're sending kids to die in Afghanistan. I said, this is outrageous. And then Tucker, I get a call from Jack Murtha, the most respected Democrat in the House, former Marine, who I work with closely.
There you go. Now, that might not mean much to people who haven't been following me or into this. John Murtha was a giant representative. He was a Democrat military in Pennsylvania, but most importantly, it was Jack and Joyce Murtha, and there they are, who were basically the namesakes of the original Windber Cancer Research Center, the one near Johnstown, the one near where Flight 93 definitely did not crash, the one where this hospice care center was being set up by Robert Malone and Jill Glasspool Malone, the one where all the legal paperwork was being done by the future United States ambassador to India, Richard Verma, who went on to be big parts of the Iran nuclear deal and the Indian nuclear deal. That's the John Murtha Center. It was the Joyce Murtha Cancer Research Center before it became, oh, that's right, the Soon Shung Research Center. The Chan Soon Shung, and Chan Soon Shung was also interviewed by Tucker Carlson. And the one center where we need to be very, very curious about, the one that seems to have this, if there's any one place where cancer data on the United States military can leak out through a shared database, it's going to be from Walter Reed through this cancer research center out. And we know, I found the paperwork where they were backing up data to NCR, National Cash Register, starting 2003. Robert Malone trained a Nigerian immigrant to run the center for us, to be in charge of all cancer data for the U.S. military. So in some ways, at least as far as that goes, Curt Weldon should be overjoyed with knowledge sharing, thanks to Robert Malone, Bob Gallo, Walter Reed, and the Chan Soon Shung Research Center, and Robert Malone. This is the one guy that he loves. He keeps winding up loving these backstabbing anti-American Democrats. As much as I feel compelled to want to like Curt Weldon. You know, so homey, and his wife's a teacher and he's a fireman or whatever. He just keeps showing up like bad pennies at all the wrong time. He loves Murtha. That's when I knew I had to show this interview. Now, Murtha's district, Murtha has since passed, and Murtha's funeral was huge. And who was at Murtha's funeral? Harry Reid, Nevada, Hillary and Bill Clinton, Richard Verma, former ambassador to India, and also a good friend of Piper Stover, who wound up at Jonathan Cooey's house. And probably a few other people I think he knows who showed up at Jonathan Cooey's house as well. He was, after all, Richard Verma, a deputy director at the United States State Department under Hillary Clinton, worried about gefilte fish, the most famous email of all time. These are the little things. And the only way to see it is you have to let go. You have to let go of this, I guess, this mandatory belief. There were hijackers. If you watched the 9/11 event this past, was it September, in Washington, D.C., it starts off, let's talk about hijackers. Let's talk about this hijacker. Let's talk about that hijacker. Who let these hijackers on? Who knew this hijacker? Where did this hijacker go? Where did that hijacker drink? Which FBI agent knew this hijacker? And what did that hijacker do? And blah, 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 blah. Really? How is that getting to the bottom of Bio 911 truth by talking about mystical hijackers? No, it gets nowhere. And I think right now the proof is in the pudding. You got 24 years of still a great big shoulder shrug, just like the JFK assassination. You could write another 5,000 books about it. It doesn't matter. You need to find a new angle. And as soon as you bring up the fact that one of the most mysterious and fantastic deaths of any United States official that I've ever seen or read about is Estes Kefauver, just a few weeks before JFK, all of a sudden, all the JFK researchers like, Estes Kefauver, I don't know, let's get back to talking about Epstein and something in Israel or whatever. Anything but Kefauver and the FDA, anything but that. Anything but talking about 9/11 in the Judith Miller Germs book and anthrax vaccines and DNA vaccines. Anything but that. Please, for the love of God, let's get back to talking about hijackers. Nowhere. And right now, they're just burning out the clock. And AE 9/11 Truth is doing nothing to stop it either. Nothing whatsoever out of AE 9/11 Truth. If they're building experts, why not highlight, gee, they really hired such crappy demolition experts that they made it look like there was a 1 kiloton suitcase nuke going off in the buildings? What kind of ragtag, unqualified building demolition experts did they hire?
And he says to me, I want you to meet with Ron Klink, Democrat from Pittsburgh. And Ron Klink's still alive. He'll verify this, Tucker. Jack's dead, but Ron's alive.
Oh, wow, great. Another heroic Democrat, probably. Wasn't John Murtha was beloved by Senator Hillary Clinton, who is surrounded by a lot of suspicious deaths, but the very well-living Harvey Weinstein, as well as Robert De Niro, to become Senator of New York just in time for the big festivities of 9/11.
He said Jack has a person who used to work for the agency that has information about Iran, and you investigate this kind of stuff, Curt. Will you meet with him? I said, sure. Ron Klink comes to my office and brings this very tall man who's a former person from the Swedish area, but he's a U.S. citizen.
You can listen to the rest. I mean, it's so incriminating. And no mention of suitcase nuke, no mention of biological weapons. I found one newspaper page that I think is the best newspaper page I've ever found. It is the perfect newspaper page. It is from March 19th, 1999. It is the best newspaper page I have ever seen because it's a newspaper page that has 3 stories on it, and all 3 stories tell you the big picture, and they all affirm exactly what we've been talking about and the bio 9/11 truth. Story 1, House, Senate, work on missile defense compromise. Curt Weldon talking about supporting the missile defense system. And yeah, a lot of the money that went into the missile defense system, of course, also benefited things such as the Strategic Computing Initiative, the SCI, which provided many benefits to the Human Genome Project. Story 2, Pentagon struggling to overcome troops' fear of anthrax vaccine because 9/11 was going to be about a great big excuse to use an experimental gene therapy DNA vaccine. Story 3, Clinton orders review of security at nuclear laboratories, which is absolutely perfect because, after all, the buildings exploded just like there was a 1 kiloton explosive in the buildings. They didn't fall, they exploded. The Twin Towers exploded. They exploded just like there was a suitcase nuke in there. 3 stories, the whole narrative. Again, March 19th, 1999, Nation. All the stories you need to know, and they all fit together. Missile defense, Curt Weldon. Story 2, anthrax vaccine. Story 3, nuclear labs. Concerns about loose nukes, suitcase nukes. All 3 stories, and they all tie together. All of them. It's 9/11. It's an internal war. It's an internal war about who's going to control stockpiles of enriched uranium, which will be used in the future to power data centers, to crunch data collected as part of genetic research. This is 1999. We're still 40, 50 years away from having enough data to really meaningfully start, running it through. We're still decades away from having the real meat and potatoes data that they think might be valuable for advancing knowledge of the human genome. And knowing that the population is going to be less than and be older, they're going to need a lot of electricity. There's no technology that anyone can foresee that's going to reduce the power needs of these massive data centers for the future. And they knew this back in 1999. So they're having this great big battle over who's going to own the uranium. The DOE is stockpiling spent uranium, which still has 98% of its potential capacity available. And then they're saying, well, we shouldn't have the military have nukes. They don't need nukes. They don't need a strategic defense initiative. We should have the DOE control all of that. And the U.S. military is like, no way. We want our own nuclear stockpile. Meanwhile, they're coming up with, well, we need to be worried about crazy Arabs and Muslims and white nationalists and anthrax. That's why we need an experimental gene therapy vaccine. And, of course, when those buildings blow up, reinforcing why we need to be afraid of all of this stuff and have more detectors or whatever, and be afraid of terrorists, it's going to be a loose nuke. It's going to be a suitcase nuke. The same thing that I thought Curt Weldon knows about. I mean, it's Curt Weldon's freaking name that's in the newspapers talking about suitcase nukes over and over and over again from 1998 right up to 2001, September 11th. It's the perfect newspaper page. It's all 3 stories. And it ties together Star Wars, missile defense. It ties together the Clintons. It ties together bioterrorism. It ties together germs, the Human Genome Project, anthrax vaccines. And then after 9/11, it ties together Judith Miller, CIA leaks, Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney involved in the Valerie Plame leak? What a huge surprise. Wasn't Joshua Lederberg the person that got Dick Cheney onto the board of Procter & Gamble, P&G? That's right. Joshua Lederberg was a key board member and shareholder at P&G. And Lederberg was appointed by Rumsfeld to lead a lot of the internal investigations after 9/11. Funny how Lederberg's just one of those names. Not even Weldon will mention that name. But he knows who he is. Instead, we're talking about, hijackers and FBI and what people wanting money from building insurance and whatever, and oil contracts and Greater Israel. That's gonna, where are they even gonna find the people to live there? All these stupid things. And when you realize the Human Genome Project and the fight over who's going to control that is at the center of so many things, it really, everything opens up. Daylight, clouds just disappear. The indestructible passport, Tazik said. That's right. Isn't that crazy? The buildings blew up and they found the passports on the. How ridiculous is that? Of course, there must be hijackers. They found the passports. How else could the passport have gotten there? And that means that Curt Weldon is totally accepting that. I guess there really were hijackers because they found the passports. The FBI is so corrupt because they could have stopped the hijackers if they did this and did that. But let's not even question how corrupt the FBI was because they just happened to find the perfectly unscratched, unburnt, passports on the ground. It's he demonstrating incredible inconsistency in which information he's willing to challenge and which information he's willing to accept. All AP stories, yeah. Well, a lot of newspapers don't have their local. Hello, Reginald. Don't have their own, reporting staff at this point, right? These are all going to be AP stories, and what Reginald is referring to is, I'm just lovingly calling it the perfect newspaper page. All 3 stories. You could just take these 3 stories and have like 1,000. You can do your crazy, pins and strings between these 3 stories. You'll have so many pins and strings between them, you won't even be able to read the stories anymore. It's perfect. William Cohen, that's right. William Cohen is also a big person in this book, the Germs book, that no one wants to address. Is he on the same drugs as Mikovits? I don't know. I mean, look, when you do it, here's the thing, everyone does, at the very least, a hard shot of caffeine before you do these shows, right? Because you want to be running on all cylinders. I just had an energy drink before this. It's what you do. You want to be on all cylinders. Just the amount of focus that I require to have all of these different screens in front of me and remember the different tabs on the different screens and what's being projected to you, not to mention the content itself. There's a lot involved here. So you need to be running at a level that is, to be quite honest, unnatural. So I don't know if he's doing a little bit more or if he just had like a quadruple latte, espresso. I always mispronounce that word. I don't know. Whatever the case, you could tell his energy levels get really, it really picks up right in the middle there. The 9/11 hijackers and the novel coronavirus are real. Yes, Tazik. It took a long time for me to actually seriously consider the possibility that the 9/11 hijackers aren't real. That was a very scary bridge for me to even consider walking over. In fact, it wasn't until a few weeks, maybe a few months ago, it wasn't until this past September 11th that I realized that bridge needed to be crossed. It was just the nonstop talk about hijackers. As if that, like, why are we talking so much about hijackers? I never had any reason to question it, but when I see this stubborn refusal to talk about anything other than hijackers and the planes, the crop dusters. How many 9/11 researchers say, oh, the terrorists learned how to fly on a crop duster? And then you provide information. Well, maybe there's a good reason why they wanted to learn on a crop duster, to distribute, aerosolized agents. Nope. That's it. I guess the plane rental place, they went there. We need to learn how to fly a plane. Well, we got all of our practice trainers out. All we have is this old crop duster. Oh, that'll do. Really? And then just leave it at that? It's such a specific plane. And why did they want us to why do we even know that? So at some point next year, my plan right now, my vision is to have a conference, to have Bio 9/11 Truth, 25th anniversary. If there's a place I'm going to have it, it's probably going to be Johnstown or Windber. It's going to be at the heart of it, because this silly little laboratory is the heart of it. And there's something about Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which I find endearing. It is one of the most oppressed cities in the United States of America. It has lost, I think, 60 to 80% of its 60 or 70% of its population. It is a shell of its former self. I grew up in a suburban area of Bridgeport, Connecticut. I don't want to say it's not like I grew up in a bad area, but I grew up in a city that has a lot of bad areas in it. So I don't feel uncomfortable being in Johnstown. It feels kind of homey in a weird way. But it's the perfect place to have this. It is perfect because that matters so much. And if people are going to go, and I don't expect it to be a huge crowd. It'd be cool if there was, but I want people to be able to go to a place that is affordable. So, having a fancy schmancy, whatever, that's not cool. That's not how, I want to roll. I know that Johnstown doesn't have a big airport, so there's the whole how do you get from Pittsburgh to Johnstown thing. We'll work all of that out. But apparently no one else wants to do it, so we're going to spearhead this. Bio 9/11 Truth. And all right, so I think that's my long show for today, and it's 4:00, 4:15 right now. No, I don't do that 4:20 thing, but it's cool if you do. And there's a little bit of sunlight left outside. I have some organizing outside to do. I'm definitely in the middle of a mad amount of archiving. I'm not, please don't take this as me suggesting that Curt Weldon is a mastermind conspirator or anything like that. He's definitely a big part of the narrative control. Okay. And sometimes finding a name like that has been underappreciated and undervalued, and then including it in compound searches just leads to amazing discoveries. And now that I can really appreciate that, it's great, and it's going to be a lot of fun tying it together with a lot of these other stories. It's going to be fun reviewing the history of the Strategic Defense Initiative and learning more about Valerie Plame and so on. We got a lot of fun things ahead. A lot of fun things ahead. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Tazik. You're always so complimentary. And what Chrissy said, one at World Trade Center. Yeah. You know what? There's only one place. There's only one place that I know of anyways. I shouldn't say it. But one of the most noteworthy memorials for the World Trade Center is at the University of Pittsburgh, Johnstown. Is it UPJ? For some odd reason, one of the steel beams from the World Trade Center was sent to Johnstown University. And they have a memorial there for it. I don't know why. Every college in USA didn't get its own beam, but Johnstown did, just down the street from Windber. And I did a little video about it a couple of years ago. And, boy, something really fun happened just a week after that. Some of you know what I'm talking about. The rest, I'm just going to have to be mysterious, but you'll find out someday. All right, guys. Thank you. Take care. Be well. God bless. Thank you. It's good to be on this journey together. Take care and God bless.